This is Waves, a podcast from APTA Michigan. I'm Andy Wicks. When is rehab not good enough? How many times has a patient been discharged before they really met their full potential? Maybe they were limited by time or number of visits or length of stay or any number of reasons. Jenna Muri-Rosenthal experienced this and decided to do something about it. She is a speech-language pathologist, a certified brain injury specialist, and a certified level 2 CrossFit trainer. She is also the founder of Fit to Function Recovery, a place for folks with neurologic conditions to see what they're capable of.
My name is Jenna Muri-Rosenthal. I am a speech and language pathologist and a certified brain injury specialist and a level 2 CrossFit trainer, an adaptive and inclusive trainer, and the founder of Fit to Function Recovery.
That's quite the array of skill sets there.
It's a lot of things.
But I'm very curious to see how this whole puzzle piece got put together. So I started following Fit to Function on Instagram because I was noticing things like, wow, she's working with these folks with neurologic conditions, kind of what I would call like chronic neurologic conditions, and really looks like they're kind of kicking their butts here. And this is really cool. And I just assumed, because that's what I do. I make assumptions. And I was like, oh, wow, she's like a PT and a CrossFit trainer and things like that. And I was like, wait a second. No. She's a speechy. What's going on here?
Sometimes we sneak in there,
I know you were being so sneaky. So
sometimes I tell people like, I'm not a PT, but I play one on Instagram.
There you go. I like it. Yeah. So how did you get here? Tell us how Fit to Function became a thing.
Sure. So as a speech therapist, my first clinical job was inpatient brain injury at Spaulding Rehab Hospital. I had a clinical placement there when I was a student. And mind you, and I liked all the students to know that when I went into graduate school, I wanted to work with individuals with autism. When I had my clinical placements, I was like, God, I don't want to work with adults. Don't make me do it. But if I have to, give me something difficult. Like, give me the hardest thing you've got. I'll take it. And they put me on the brain injury unit and I never looked.
You're one of us.
Right? Right. For all the students who think they know what they want to do, give something a try if you're not sure. So I worked in inpatient rehab. I've been in the field 16, 17 years now, and the tides of rehab have changed quite a bit. So I was actually a part of moving Spaulding from its old home to a brand new facility. When I started as a speech therapist, it seems like a long story, but it's relevant. When I started as a speech therapist, some of our brain injury survivors would stay with us for like 6, 7, 8, 9 months at a time inpatient. By the time we moved to the new hospital 5 years later, they wanted the average length of stay for a brain injury survivor to be 10 to 14 days. And I just got to this point where I was like, what am I doing for these people? Like, I meet them, I hand them some worksheets and strategies and say, hey, best of luck as they're walking out the door.
Yeah.
And so I left rehab and I moved to acute care. In that time, I started doing CrossFit. I'm a former collegiate athlete, and I was in need of something to do because I never knew what to do in a gym by myself. Mm-hmm. Doing CrossFit, really quickly identified that I wanted to coach it, because CrossFit, for those who don't know it, a lot of it is you take a really big and difficult thing and you break it down into its components, and then you build it back up again to help people develop a skill, which to me was like cognitive rehabilitation. I was like, perfect. I get to do this, but maybe with people who actually want to, as opposed to some of my agitated brain injury survivors who didn't want to. And really quickly just identified the gym as a really good place for people in recovery. So many folks that I work with, they don't move functionally, right? And PT, what they were getting in standard rehab was really isolated kinds of things that didn't resonate for individuals, particularly individuals with cognitive limitations, right? Because you're asking them to do these like really isolated movements to help them walk. And they're like, no, I want to walk. And they can't see the connection. So I, as a speech therapist, always had a lot of private one-on-one clients who would come to me at the end of rehab and say, I need more, because rehab doesn't give people enough, right? And particularly in speech therapy, because we're kind of at the bottom of the barrel, right? So sadly, right? But sadly for some folks, they even have to make a decision in their rehab package where it's like, you can have OTP to your speech. What do you want? And 9 times out of 10, people are going to say, well, I'd love to be able to remember, but I need to walk, right? And so I took on a lot of private speech clients looking for more. And my goal with them was always really functional, right? So what are the things that you need to do to get back to your life? I don't need to just give you a worksheet. I need to help you communicate in the ways that are meaningful to your job or your family or whatever. So all of that to say, then I started coaching and I kind of looked at some of my one-on-one speech therapy folks and said, hey, like, would you try this thing with me? I had this crazy idea. I want you to come into the gym and let's just see. And lo and behold, people moved better when you put weights in their hand and gave them a room full of people exercising. And it kind of grew from there.
That's so, so students, if you're listening, so far we've talked about salience, specificity. I'm trying to think, what's the Climb article that we all reference for the points of neuroplasticity? Like you're just going right down the list there, Jenna. It's amazing.
Thanks.
And
I tried.
and it's true. Like, in the time that I spent, I was fortunate enough to work in a situation that was a little different. We weren't an inpatient rehab. We were kind of a post-acute. So we still had the benefit and the luxury of those weeks to months long lengths of stay. But yeah, that's not the norm by any stretch of the imagination. And so clinicians are almost getting forced to make these impossible decisions based on arbitrary metrics of productivity, et cetera, decisions that are not made by clinicians, that are made by other people. And none of them for the benefit of the patient, really. And it's like, okay, yes, I would love to be able to teach you. I would love to be able to get you stronger, but I really need to be able to check off this list of, can you get into a car? Can you get up and down a flight of stairs? Can you, and we almost break it down into this weird checklist that, well, yes, these movements are important. They're not maybe what the patient wants.
Right.
Patient's like, hey, I want to be able to, go fishing. I want to be able to, whatever it is. So,
Right.
yeah.
And, for me, it was always in all of the years of all of my rehab, and not just, for speech only. It's like you sit in those rounds with the team and it's like what the patients are often getting is like, it's good enough.
Yeah.
Right. It's like, you can kind of get around with one person helping you. That's good enough for you to go home. And you can kind of talk, you can say a few words, good enough. And so I always believed that people deserved an opportunity to recover better than good enough. And so that's been our slogan since we started. Like there's there's a time and a place. Yes, you're going to get your basic from therapy. Standard medicine, sadly, and is going to leave you off at good enough. We're going to help you find your way to better than that.
Yeah. Which is, I'm thankful that you're doing that. It's just unfortunate that our medical system makes that necessary. But hey, here we are.
Here we are.
That's a different conversation for a different episode.
Exactly.
Yeah. So let's maybe talk about that a little bit more. That good enough versus, I don't know. You call your slogan is better than good enough. And I think it's like, how do we, okay. So again, a lot of our listeners are students. So how do we get them to think about things in a world where payers, administrators, and things like that aren't working towards better than good enough? How do we get our students still fired up and like, I can do this. I can make my patient better than whatever the baseline, the absolute bare minimum to get them home is.
Right. I mean, I think about it a lot of times. I'll say to people, rehabilitation is time limited and exercise is forever. So anything that we can do to help our patients find the difference between what feels like therapy and what feels like working out. And I know that there are limitations within standard rehab, and if you're in a clinic and you're checking those boxes, but I always break it down for people. I think every PT knows, like, yes, squats are functional. We all do sit to stands. Sure. But I take that to think about every functional movement that someone's going to do and every way in which you need to approach it from a PT perspective. And then you think, how can I make this exercise? How can I make this fitness? Right. So the biggest example for me is burpees, right? Like, what is a burpee? It's a controlled fall.
I wrote that
And
down as my first talking point there.
You want me to stop?
No, keep going. This is great.
A burpee is a controlled fall, and it's getting up when you fall. And for a lot of people, we often in rehab, we like wrap people up in bubble wrap and we want you to be super safe, go home, don't fall. And again, this is no fault to the therapists because it is time limited. But when people come into my gym, one of the first things I say to them is, how do you get down to the ground and back up again? And 90% of the time, the answer is, I don't.
Yeah.
My PT told me not to fall.
Yeah.
So I don't fall. And it's like, okay, like, yes, but everybody falls, right? It's a reality of life. And so taking things that, how can we make this a therapeutic, check a box exercise, but make it relational to fitness and exercise, which someone can always do, always and forever in different ways as they carry on with their lifelong recovery.
Yeah. So students, we're talking about intensity now. Okay, this is great because yes, you can do a burpee to simulate a fall, but hey, let's do 10 burpees or let's do as many burpees as you can do in a minute or whatever it is to get that heart rate up, get that, let's challenge them so that when they have one fall, it's easy to get back up instead of taking everything out of them. No, I love that. And I think so in physical therapy, high intensity gait training is kind of a big,
Yeah.
big, big thing. I'm sure that's kind of made its way into the CrossFit world a little bit in terms of, at least in terms of lingo, with a lot of the, I mean, going to be completely reductive and oversimplify things, but essentially, like, let's get their heart rate up. Okay. We know increased aerobic activity increases BDNF production, increases neuroplasticity. It's good for everything. Okay. And that has not been the norm in a lot of rehab. Okay. In terms of like counting number of steps that a patient will take, it's like 17 or, I'm exaggerating, but it's not a lot. And it certainly isn't getting their heart rate up. And instead, if you watch the people who are like on the forefront of high intensity gait training, I saw a video, I think it was George Hornby that posted it, of having a patient in a light gait, okay, overhead harness system, like jogging down the hall in a light gait. It was amazing to watch because this guy, not only is he stabilized with the light gait, but he's got to pull the thing. And that thing is not, it's not light. So like those kinds of things are fantastic. And I love that. I feel like slowly the idea of we don't need to treat these patients with kid gloves anymore is starting
Yeah.
to change, and we can really start to push them and expect them to do hard things.
100%. And I always tell people too, like, the gym teaches you that you can do hard things, and as silly as it is, I think, over the years, stroke and brain injury survivors and other individuals with various limitations and disabilities, they don't recognize that what they're doing is really hard all the time, right? I say to them, like, you survived a stroke. You learned how to walk again. You are doing all of these things that are hard. But that to them, yes, it's hard, but it doesn't feel like winning.
Yeah. Yes. Ooh,
Just
that's a
feel
great
like
way to put it.
right? It feels like a thing they have to do. I had someone once ask one of my stroke survivors, "How did you keep going?" And she said, "What was the alternative?" Right? Like, that's the only option. But getting them to a place where they can see measurable progress in things that are hard, that aren't just them recovering, like lifting a heavier weight. Like, it is so empowering to them to see, to see that in numbers, because the proof is in the numbers. We see it all the time. We
Yep.
tell them they're moving faster, they're walking faster. I can tell you remember that better. And they're like, "Yeah, sure, but I'm not back to me yet."
Yeah.
And for them, until they're back to that baseline of self, it doesn't feel like progress. But if I say 6 weeks ago, you could only lift this 15-pound dumbbell, and now you're slinging 30 pounds around, they can't argue with
Yeah.
that. And that is progress. And it's a hard thing. They're doing hard things every day, and it helps. There's carryover for that into everyday life.
I'm going to go back to what you just said a few seconds ago because I think this could revolutionize rehab. I really do. How do
Mhm.
you get your patients to feel like they're winning instead of just surviving? Because
Right.
absolutely, 100%, the patients that I worked with, a lot of them were, like traumatic, catastrophic car accident survivors. And it's like you got ripped apart and crushed to pieces, and you are just trying to get through your day. How do I get it to a point where you feel like you really accomplished something today? And it's one thing for me to just try to be a cheerleader and really root them on, which is important. Don't get me wrong, but
Sure.
at the same time, they need something maybe tangible, something like that to be able to say, yeah, I really did do that. And that's man, oh man. Okay.
Right. And I go back to it all the time with them. I say that the proof is in the numbers, right? The measurements do not lie. And I can't tell you how often my folks go back to PT and they failed their time walk test or they didn't do whatever and they come in discouraged. Okay. Sure. But like, that's a metric. But look at your
Yeah.
performance. Like, look at the fact that on this 10-minute AMRAP, however long ago you did 4 rounds and today you did 7 and it was heavier and it was harder. And even when they don't have that belief in self, they go, "Oh, okay, all right, fair," right? You can't argue with you just can't, and it works for able-bodied athletes too. I
Mhm.
mean, that is why CrossFit works for so many people, right? Because there's a measure and you think, "Ah, I just really wish I were getting better." And then you're like, "Oh, actually,
Yeah.
it says right."
You objectively did more than you did before. So.
Did it faster. So, okay. Right. Exactly.
What's one frustration I've had with so many objective measures from the PT side of things. And I'd be curious to hear from a speechy side of things, your perspective, because it's like, okay, there are the Academy of Neurophysical Therapy. I really should know the official name because I'm a member of this academy. But anyway, the neuro section of APTA has a list of like, if you need to know tests for the neuro population, these are the 5 or 6 that really you should know. Like the Berg Balance Scale, for example, 6-minute walk test, functional gait assessment, things like that. And they're great tests. Don't get me wrong. Like they're there for a reason. The data to back them up is there. But one thing that I feel like we being educators, especially in the PT world, don't do a good job of is telling our students really what is it are you measuring, and specifically what aren't you measuring? Because so as an example, there's the DGI, the Dynamic Gait Index, and there's the modified DGI. I used to use the modified DGI all the time because one thing that the DGI didn't really do a great job of capturing change, because in the modified DGI, I want to say added in a time element. So it really allowed for maybe your performance didn't do, like your gait didn't do as good a job, but you did that 10 seconds faster than you did last time. Again, that's measurable objective change. Oh. But on the old test, it wouldn't have necessarily captured that because like, yeah, you got a weird hitch in your get along and you're all asymmetric and blah, blah, blah. But you're walking, like now you can cross the crosswalk without getting hit by a bus,
exactly.
Stuff like that. So it's important, I think, to be able to educate our students and clinicians so that they can tell the patients, maybe, yeah, your score didn't improve that much, but you know what? Take it for a grain of salt because all these other things really did change. And that's hard. That's really, really hard. And that's one of the things that I think, CrossFit and the stuff that you do has a better time of that.
Right. Yeah. And I think it's very true in speech. And I mean, so I love being a speech therapist. I love the work that I do, but I hate a lot of the standard stuff, right? Like how many times can I have you do this? Tell me all the words you can think of that start with the letter F in a minute. Like, okay, cool. But, and that's great. And I can see that you did more, but ultimately, can you go out there and have a communication exchange with a novel partner, right? Can you go to the store and order what you want? Mm-hmm. If you have aphasia, can you remember, and for us in the gym, can you remember what comes next in the workout? Can you start to use your whiteboard? That is so much more functional than like, here's this worksheet.
Yeah.
You didn't remember these 7 words that I told you 5 minutes ago. Like it's not functional. And the measures are important. They give us an understanding of sort of what we're looking at. But, I always come back to one of the first folks that was a private client of mine that then I encouraged to get into the gym. Traumatic brain injury. She was 40. She was playing golf with friends and a friend shanked the ball, smacked her the left side of the head. TBI'd, physically pretty fine after a couple of weeks, pretty bad aphasia.
Yeah.
And when she went home, she just wanted to be able to have conversations. It was actually during the first Trump election. She wanted to be able to like engage in political dialogue with her friends. And she would go to dinner and she would feel lost, right? She can't keep up. And she was a PE teacher and she wanted to get back to work. Those worksheets did nothing for her. So what we did was we went to school and we took pictures and videos of all the weird little games and toys that you do in childhood, like gym class. And we scripted it and we practiced, like, how do I describe this game, which doesn't even have a name, so that I can teach it, right? And that's function. It's not measurable in the ways that our standard tests want from us, but it is what the person wants to be able to do. So if your patient says they want to run, maybe we can't get them running, but how can we get them moving faster so that running is the next thing on the table? That doesn't mean, even if they don't pass whatever standard test you have to give them.
It reminds me, when I was in the clinic, I had the benefit of working with some awesome speech therapists when I was in the clinic. And I have the utmost respect for them because they made my job way easier. I'll say that. But one of the patients we had, I remember he was a stroke survivor and he was a radio DJ prior to a stroke. And so the speech therapist had this guy interview me as if I was a guest on his radio show. Like it was really, really cool. And it was something I'd never seen before. I was still pretty new out of school. And I was like, wow,
yeah,
we can do stuff like this. Like, this is so cool.
Right. We can make it make sense.
Yeah.
Make it make sense, right? To the students. Like that's the hardest thing when you're learning, because you're like, here's this test, these are the things I'm supposed to do. Okay. But now how do I take this and make it feel real to the patient or the athlete? Like, how do I make them feel like they're working and make it like, hey, I want you to do this really isolated thing. This is why it matters,
Yes.
right? This will help you open your car door.
Yeah. If you don't have the why, then it's a quad
Right.
set and blah, 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 big deal.
Exactly.
I want to talk a little bit something else that you mentioned in one of your introductory videos on your website, which I will link to in the show notes. You talked about normalizing movement in the gym, and if I misinterpreted it, please
No?
forgive me. But what I took from it was, as you said, having being a survivor of a stroke or a brain injury or any really sort of kind of major neurologic incident can be very isolating, very, very isolating. And as I'm thinking about this, I'm thinking when I go to the gym, do I see people who clearly have a movement disorder or a neurologic impairment? And the answer is no, I don't.
No.
And would someone who had that feel comfortable going to my local YMCA and trying things out? Chances are they would not.
Right.
So talk about the value that comes from that. And you talk about the community that emerges from that. Why is that such a big deal?
Yeah. So there's a couple elements to that, right? I mean, but yes, to your point, when we train trainers to work with folks with disabilities, you have the CDC estimates that 1 in 4 individuals are living with a disability, right? It's a little bit more greater than that now, but you don't see that in your standard gym. You don't look around and see 1 in 4 with some sort of limitation. And that's why we're trying to create greater access to movement, right? It's all about access. But what happens to a lot of folks, especially those with some sort of acquired disability, there's a lot of hesitation around the fact that they move differently,
Mhm.
right? Just people look at something and they think, I can't. That's that,
Yep.
right? Like, I only have one arm, like, that's functioning because of my stroke. So, of course, I can't swing a kettlebell. But guess what? You can do it with one arm, right?
Mhm.
And it seems so common sense to a lot of us, but it's not if you're on the other side of it, where you think, I'm different, now I can. And so we use the gym to focus on what you can do. And so much of medicine focuses on what you can't do anymore, right? Like, you had XYZ, now you can no longer do XYZ. And in the gym, we're like, let's focus on the stuff you can do. And a lot of creating that independence is teaching athletes, sorry, I call them all athletes, how to advocate for themselves and what their go-to adaptations are. So if I walk into a class and I have hemiplegia and it's shoulder press day, I need to know that it's okay to just use a dumbbell on one side. I don't need to use a barbell, right?
Mhm.
Or that it's okay to squat to a box. I'm still squatting, right?
Mhm.
I'm still doing the thing. Maybe I'm holding on to a third point of contact, but I'm still moving through space in that way. And so you find initially there's a lot of hesitation to get into it at first because people think I can't. And then you show them how they can. And many of my folks, they have this sensitivity. They don't want to be in a group. They don't want to be in a class. They don't want anyone else to kind of see
Mm.
that they're different. But the magic of fitness is that when it's 3, 2, 1, go, clock's running, it's time to work, it all melts away.
Mm.
They all forget, right? Yeah, I see it all the time where they're sort of like, "Ooh, a little shifty, I'm a little uncomfortable, I don't want anyone else to see or notice." And then as soon as everybody's moving, forget it. You're just the only goal in front of you is to go hard. You forget that you may look different or
Mhm.
move different. And so giving people those tools so that they can then go out into the world. And for us, we always talk about training folks. We want to give them their go-to adaptations. We want them to have some things in their back pocket so that if they ever find themselves in a traditional gym or a traditional class, they know what to do to modify it so that they don't need us.
Mhm. I was gonna bring up that point you kinda touched on it, is kind of that being maybe overly self-conscious about how they move and how the rest of the people in the gym will perceive them. And as I was thinking about this, then I all of a sudden started thinking about those videos you see about people who are using gym equipment wrong. And I'm like, you could be that
Yeah, well,
guy, you know.
could be. Exactly.
I
Exactly.
kind
It's
of I
so
have no
true.
idea what he's doing, some sort of interpretive dance there on the cable column, but whatever. Like,
Well, hey, he's moving,
he's
right?
moving, so more power to him. Yeah, and
Right.
that's gotta be hard. I had a conversation on a previous episode with a gentleman kind of talking about the places where we used to work that had these really great kind of inclusive environments, almost like a campus where the people that had these neurologic impairments were kind of all on a level playing field, and it was this great, you know, great environment. But the challenge is that when they went out into the community, suddenly they left that safe space and they're back in kind of the harsh reality of the rest of the world. And so you have to balance this, and I'm glad that you talked about the balancing of, yes, we can create a space where everyone here is dealing with something, and maybe it's more obvious to some or others, but if you want to go to your local gym in the community, how do we set you up so that you can do that successfully? And then you talked about those, whatever your adaptations might need to be. So that's, great that you're encouraging that, get out there and just be in the community.
Yeah. And, it's brain injury in particular, but I'm sure many conditions, it's really isolating, right? Because you lose your core, your work cohort, your social circle changes, you're now possibly dependent on others. And so folks that are going through recovery of some sort, recovery becomes their full-time job. And a lot of their social outlets kind of like fall away. And so if you can create a space in which something like the gym, like everybody goes to the gym, right? Well, everybody should go to the gym, but it becomes a space where they can come and just do a thing. And then that hopefully empowers them to go to other type of fitness spaces, and one thing I think about and talk about a lot is, here like Spalding has a great adaptive sport program. So as you're going through your rehab, you can go cycling or kayaking or skiing, all these things. But but the problem is that those programs uh, are really facilitated in the way that like the individual in recovery, stroke survivor, for example, can only do that if there's like
Mm.
PT students putting them in the boat
Yeah.
and like paddles for them, right? So we're not creating a thing they can do on their own. So what is the bridge between recovery and sport? Fitness.
Mm.
So like teach them how to move, teach them how to get in and on the boat, give them the skills to cycle, give them the confidence to do those things so that then they maybe can go out and try sport again.
Yeah. That return to normalcy, or finding whatever the new normalcy is
Yeah.
such a profound thing. I mean, I'm sure you've seen it even as a speech therapist and as a coach, of just the importance of that self-efficacy, and sometimes it's not about the objective measure. Sometimes it's just you give them like, oh, I can play wheelchair basketball now, or I can play, like, and all of a sudden you just see their eyes light up in a way that you maybe have never seen before, because
Right.
like, oh, you were a competitive athlete. Now I can see that fire suddenly is relit, and you're going to go kick someone's ass now.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly, and I don't know if you see this, your experience, but, I really find that folks, they don't enjoy an adapted version of a sport they used to play.
I've heard
Yes.
that. I've heard that.
Right? Not 100%, but I've never met a hockey player with an injury who likes sled
Mhm.
hockey. Now, I know many adaptive folks who learn about sled hockey, do it and love it, right?
Mhm.
And so there's something different in when you knew how to do a thing and now it's different how you do that thing. But if you can find an alternative, and CrossFit, specifically functional fitness, is a sport. It's the sport of fitness, right? It's sort
Mhm.
of silly, but for a lot of the folks that come through the door, it's new to them.
Yeah.
It's a new challenge that they can get better at, as opposed to now I'm trying this sport I used to play when I was fully able-bodied and I can't do it as well. And that's frustrating because that's a different measure. Because now you're back to I'm trying to measure me against me and me how I know I used to ski or I used to play golf. But if you take something like fitness and weightlifting, which not nearly as many people have experience with, it's like I'm learning all of these new
Mhm.
things and I'm seeing how I can get better at them.
Yeah, that's interesting. I never really thought about that, but I think you're right, and I'd be curious if there was any research to back that up. About, I used to play basketball. Now I had a spinal cord injury. I play wheelchair basketball. But
Right.
I think I've heard anecdotally a lot of that. I used to do this after my injury. I tried adaptive, something completely different.
Yep,
And maybe
exactly.
that's a sign of, that closure of one chapter of life. And maybe, there's a lot of reasons we could get wax philosophical about it,
Right.
but that's very interesting. Very interesting.
Right.
Okay.
I mean, and I can even liken it to myself. Like the older I got, the less good I got at basketball, right? So like playing in rec leagues, the new and fresh and young folks coming out of college are playing, and you're sort of like, you know what, I'm no longer learning at this
Yeah.
sport, right? It's different. But when I started doing CrossFit, I was like, "There's something new I can learn,
Mhm.
right? There's a new skill, a new whole host of skills. And so I think in general, encouraging our folks, and you don't want to diminish their hopes. You don't want to say, hey, you may never do this again, so
Yeah.
don't. Well, say, hey, try this, because that also fires up new learning in the brain, right? You're going to get better BDNF from that as well, because you go do something high intensity, you facilitate that growth of new learning. Now your brain knows new patterns, new coordination, and all of that, and that just carries over.
Maybe that's why pickleball is so popular now.
Maybe, maybe I've never tried it.
I haven't either, but I have a colleague who, this is, contradicting what we just said, but she's been an avid tennis player, I think, for most of her life. But she has transitioned as she's aged to pickleball, and she's retiring at the end of the summer. Mary, I love you. I'm going to miss you a ton. And she's like, you're never going to find me because I'm going to be on the pickleball court. Good for you.
Perfect. Yeah, have at it.
Go just destroy those youngsters. I have students, it's funny, I have students who will go, it's incredibly popular among my students.
Is it?
Yeah, really is. But they will also tell me that they'll go to like the open courts and just get their asses kicked by these 70-year-olds. Like, yeah,
That is
like good for you. It's a
fantastic.
humbling experience. You needed that.
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah. Awesome. Okay. I got through all my talking points. On this podcast, Jenna, we are very pro soapbox.
Oh
So
boy.
if you have a soapbox that you would wish to stand upon and speak to the masses, you are
Mm,
welcome. You don't need to
yeah.
limit yourself to one soapbox. I don't need to, it's not a requirement, it's simply an
Well,
invitation.
I have many.
Okay.
There's so many. I feel like I've already stood on several so far in this short amount of time. I think for the PTs listening,
Mm-hmm. I mean, who knows? Maybe there's some speech therapists listening too. You never know.
hopefully, and the speech therapist and anybody listening. One of the things that was hard when I started this transition of this program is that there is people think that CrossFit is not safe,
Ooh.
right?
Yep.
So, yep, right. Your traditional, many PTs will say, "Oh, that's where I get all my patients from. That's how people do it." Right?
Sure,
Yeah, you've
sure,
probably
sure. Yeah.
you've probably seen it. You've probably said
Yep.
it. You know the problem. And I have even had stroke survivors or folks kind of reach out, inquire about the program, and then be like, "Oh, my PT told me that's not safe because CrossFit's not safe." Okay. So, what I always explain to folks when they come through the door, and this is one of the most important things about what we do, is that yes, CrossFit can be dangerous, but what you know of CrossFit is kind of like what the elite level athletes are doing. Like you see them swinging from the rings and tossing big barbells overhead. That's like the Super Bowl of fitness, right?
Yeah.
That's like, right? That's the Olympics of CrossFit. It's not what your everyday user is all about. And the reason that it works as a training methodology is that it prioritizes functional fitness. So that simply means that we're doing movements that you see out there in everyday life. Sitting down and standing up, picking stuff up off the floor, that dreaded burpee where it's a controlled file
I
getting up
hate
and you fall.
burpees.
Most people do.
No one likes burpees. No one does.
They're
No one does.
burpees, and you don't have to like them, but you gotta know how to do them,
Mhm.
right?
No, no,
Um,
I get it.
and CrossFit is infinitely scalable and infinitely modifiable. And so if you take a look at how someone moves functionally, you can scale it down for the beginner, you can scale it up for those who are more advanced, and you can modify it to almost any limitation, right? And one of the examples I'll use for folks a lot is, like when we deadlift, we hinge, like we stand up, we reach forward, we pick up heavy weight. Your mom always said, don't hurt your back, right? Like do it a certain way. And are individuals in wheelchairs picking stuff up like that? Prob Probably not in that same way. They pick stuff up, right? But for most of them, they go to the side.
Mhm.
So train that.
Yeah.
Right? It's a seated deadlift. But I think too many people just think, ooh, CrossFit, that's crazy, without sort of understanding the functional fitness element of it. And that's it, but that's why it works.
So I'm gonna tag onto your soapbox with another soapbox that I
Please.
have, and it's the power of words. Because people saying, "Oh, so and so told me, my doctor told me, my PT told me that if I bend a certain way, my back's going to explode, or if I do this, I'm going to
Right.
break." And it's like,
Just don't.
don't do that. And
Right.
it's not even necessarily. I've never heard in all my years in working in a rehab setting, I've never heard a physician or a clinician say you will never do X again. But they might say something like, the chances of you doing X again are very low, which statistically speaking might be very true. But what the patient hears is, I will never do X again. So it's a two-way street. But
Yep.
really, I think the onus is on the clinician of be careful what you say, because
Yep. Definitely.
what you say and what is heard are usually two different things. But there's such a dichotomy in the power differential between clinician and patient. And they're looking, especially when they're in a vulnerable place like they are in a rehab setting, they're looking to you, the provider, for wisdom, comfort, safety, things like that. And when they hear things like the chances of you doing this again are very low, that might come across as I'm never doing it again. And really
Yep.
it's unfortunate. But it does these things. It carries on you're planting seeds that last for years and years and years. And then you see them, Jenna, when they're like, oh, well, so-and-so told me I shouldn't do CrossFit because of my plaque psoriasis or whatever. Like, who knows? Like, it's just like, no,
Yeah.
come on. You don't need to
Right.
worry about
Right.
that.
Right. And particularly like if you just zoom out to that thought process of like, we all move.
Yeah.
We're made to move. We all got to pick stuff up. We have to sit down. We have to open doors. And so using functional fitness means we're going to help you move in ways that help you function in life. And there isn't a single person who wouldn't benefit from that. Even some of the old schools of thought on certain conditions shouldn't exercise, forget it, right? Like you used to believe like ALS, don't do
Yeah,
it,
yeah.
right? Don't do it. Don't ruin those muscles. Okay, well, it turns out there's a lot of things we can do to help you move better, feel better, be a little safer,
Hmm.
maybe,
Hmm.
understand how you move to help you even as the disease is progressing. And so it's really like nothing's off the table.
Well, and even from
Um,
like just a quality of life perspective, like,
100%.
guess what? You have ALS and you like to go to the gym? Great.
Listen,
You know?
yeah. Right.
Ugh,
Exactly.
man.
Exactly. And so I think that's a big one. I think just encouraging people to kind of that they can get back to it. And another thing that has been real that I've seen a lot of, I know all of you really good PTs, people get discharged from rehab or from service. There comes a time
Mhm.
limited point where insurance, rehab goals, whatever,
Yep.
they get discharged. And I know that PTs always say, come back in X months,
Yep.
right? Let's do this again. I can tell you with almost 100% of the 200 athletes I have seen over these last 6 years, they don't hear that.
Really?
They think I was kicked out of PT, that's that, right? And so with a lot of the folks that I've been working with after however long, I'm like, "Hey, maybe now's a good time to re-up your PT,"
Yeah.
right? Because you've had all of these changes, go back. And I've had many athletes now do that and be really pleased with it and find success. I don't know what you can do on the inside, but that goes back to your point of like, they only hear certain
Yep.
things. So often they hear I'm being kicked out.
Yeah. From the PT perspective, from the PT side of things, one of the things that we're trying to do is improve that preventative care is maybe the wrong word, but that management of care. And I think
Yeah.
especially in chronic conditions of like, yeah, maybe this episode of care is done, but let's plan to check in 6 months and just
Yeah.
and see, especially when you have a progressing condition or just, I mean,
Yeah.
you had a stroke. Well, guess what? Everything is complex now. There's a lot of things we got to be keeping tabs on,
Right.
and that's I think a relatively new shift.
Yeah, yeah. And I think from their perspective, from the survivor's perspective, they're moving through stages
Mm,
of recovery and grief and acceptance and all of that. So when they're told you're done with rehab, they're like, it's over,
yeah,
right? Got to move on to the next thing. And that's that, right? And they feel really like cast adrift.
yeah,
And often I hear a lot from physical therapists now sending people to us saying, like, we're so grateful there's a place to send
yeah,
them, right? Because nobody wants to get rid of, like, kind of cut these folks off when they are,
yeah.
but that's the reality of it. But for whatever reason, what is not being recognized on their end is like, oh, I can go back. They just see it as it's over.
That's
Got to
over.
figure out life on my own,
Yeah.
right? And so I think that's something that, as you're saying, it's changing, which is good, but it's just making sure that it's heard because there's a lot going on for them. So I get that they don't get that message.
Well, we're changing the world a little bit at a time.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. When I worked at inpatient rehab, we would always just say, making the world a better place, one brain injury survivor at a time. And still doing it. We're still doing it.
Oh, man. Awesome. Well, Jenna, thank you so much for your time here. This is fantastic. I hope that people listening to this kind of get a sense of the possibilities that are out there because, man, oh, man, there's so much that
Yeah.
we can be doing. We will link to the Fit to Function website where you can find out everything that's going on. You are located in the Boston area, is that correct?
Yes, that
So,
is correct.
so not close to Michigan at all, but that's okay. If you're out in the Boston area, look them up, say hi.
Yeah, come visit. And check out our Instagram where I'm always just showing what the athletes are doing.
It is pretty cool.
Yes, thank you, thank
I
you.
have I
Um,
think I think I owe you an apology because I think I stole a picture that I use in one of my lectures.
that's great. Now I need to know what it is, though. You're gonna have to send me, like, a
I will,
screenshot of
I use it in our, like, strength training for the neurological impairment, and it's someone they're sitting in they're using a weighted rope, and you're behind them, kinda, like, stabilizing them in the chair. Yeah,
awesome.
it's pretty rad. I show them
No,
like, "Listen, like, we can do these things." That's a speech
yeah.
therapist doing that. Come on, guys, get off your duff.
If the speech therapist can do it, we can do it too.
Exactly, exactly.
And I will toss out just one more plug for anyone who's interested. I'm also seminar staff at the Adaptive Training Academy,
Mm,
and we train trainers to work with individuals with disabilities. So
ooh,
we offer in-person and online virtual seminars, and it's ATA.fit, but it's open to anyone. You don't have to be a trainer, but we get a lot of therapists who come through and we just go through functional fitness for like one arm, one leg, seated, neuro, and
ooh,
intellectual.
nice.
So it's a really good foundation on how do I modify,
Okay.
essentially?
ATA.fit. I'm looking it up right now. My computer's taking forever, but okay, cool. I will link to that as well. Super cool.
Awesome.
All right.
Well, thank you.
Well,
This
thank
was great.
you. Jenna Muri-Rosenthal is a speech-language pathologist, a certified CrossFit trainer, and the founder of Fit to Function Recovery. Links to all her work can be found in the show notes. Waves is a production of APTA Michigan. It is hosted by me, Andy Wicks, and as I don't have a GA at the moment, I also edited this one. We can be found online at www.aptami.org or on social media at APTAMI-Waves. Our episodes can be streamed wherever you get your podcasts. And if you're the rating type, we would be forever grateful if you would leave us a review on your podcatcher of choice. It truly does influence that almighty algorithm and get us in front of more people. Thank you for listening, and may your documentation always be done on time.